Hi, good afternoon and welcome to the 14th edition of the Jarman Whitechapel Weekend. I'm Maggie Ellis and I'm head of Film London's Artist Moving Image Network, otherwise known as Flamin'. And also here with me today is Greta Hewison, our production coordinator at Flamin', who leads on all things to do with Jarman, and that's an annual program of work, and she's rather brilliant at it. A little bit about the award. It was set up in 2008 to bring attention and to focus on artists who work with film as their medium, artists who are filmmakers, who are inventive, experimental, breaking the rules, breaking boundaries, and really presenting us with something quite surprising, often playful, but always challenging and interesting. And over the years, we've worked with some amazing artists. We're very privileged for that. And this year is no exception. And we have 6 people on the shortlist. And in alphabetical order, they are Adham Faramawy, Georgina Starr, Guy Oliver, Jasmina Cibic, Larry Achiampong, and Sophia Al-Maria. And today and tomorrow, there'll be a really rich variety of presentations from each of the artists. So to kick off this afternoon, we're going to hear from Sophia Al-Maria, and she's going to be showing 3 short works and reading from some of her new writings. Sophia is her work is very cinematic. And she weaves together literature, oral history, dance, music, and often, again, sci-fi backgrounds. It's always very exciting. After Sophia, there'll be a nice long lunch break for you. And at 3:30, we'll come back to Jasmina Cibic, and at 5 o'clock, Guy Oliver. And just finishing off before passing over to Greta, I'd like to give huge thanks to the artists, not just the shortlisted artists, but artists that we work with across, many schemes and commissions. They've made a fantastic contribution to moving image work. And the 6 shortlisted artists to this particular program this year. Big thanks go to the Arts Council, without whom none of this would be possible, and who've been amazing supporters throughout. Also to the Whitechapel Gallery, who've been partners from the beginning, and in particular, Ivana Blazvik, Jane and Richard from the curatorial side, Sam and Ralph for their extraordinary technical support, which we definitely need in these online days, and Matchbox Cine and 121 Captions, who've worked really hard on making sure that the whole program is captioned. And last and certainly not least, thank you to everybody at Film London who are behind this project. We work very closely with the comms department, and for my colleagues in Flamin', Rose, Duncan and Greta, who put enormous amount of effort and work and passion into this area of filmmaking. And I'd like to pass over to Greta, Jarman lady, and say, do enjoy the weekend, and we hope to see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Maggie. Before we start the presentations, I just want to mention a few points for housekeeping. And as Maggie mentioned, we're absolutely thrilled to say that all of the presentations this afternoon will be captioned. So that's works that we'll be screening, and then also the live elements of the event. For the works that will be streamed, the captions will appear as baked into those films. And for the live portions of the events, if you want captions, you can toggle those on and off using the subtitles/closed captions button on the bottom right-hand side of the YouTube window. And we're really pleased about that. After you've heard from me, we'll go straight into Sophia Al-Maria's presentation. And as Maggie said, you'll be able to watch 3 short pieces of work by Sophia and then hear her read some of her new writing. After she's finished her reading, we'll go straight into a break. And that break will be quite a long break of an hour and a half, so you'll be able to have some lunch. But we also really encourage you to use the break to explore the works of the shortlisted artists that we have featured on the Whitechapel website. If you're watching me from the Whitechapel website, great. All you need to do is scroll down and you'll see the 6 works by the shortlisted artists there. If you're watching on YouTube, you can click over to the Whitechapel website, find the Film London Jarman Award programme on the events page, and then click the button saying Launch Weekend Hub page, and you'll be able to find the work. And I'm really pleased to also say that all of those works have captions that you can toggle on and off using the CC button, apart from Quarantine by Georgina Starr, because that work doesn't have any dialogue. And we'd love to welcome you back at 3:30 p.m. as Maggie says, to hear from Jasmina Cibic. But for now, thank you so much for being here, for joining us. And here is Sophia Al-Maria's work, Mothership.
Hello, my name is Sophia Al-Maria, and thank you for watching those 3 short films. I chose those pieces because they cover a wide range of my practice. And the first film, Mothership, was made the first round when I was nominated for the Jarman Award. And that piece, I feel, has a strong resonance between when I made that and then the last film, Baalbek 1, 2, 3, which is a collaboration and a small piece done with Tosh Basko, who's dancing and reading Etel Adnan's poem Baalbek. And recently I did a performance, or I made a sculpture at the Serpentine in the park, which is on view until April of next year. And that public sculpture can be visited and danced on and meditated upon. And it's intended as a sort of quiet space for anybody to go and visit. So it was very much a step away from the cinematic. And the performance, which was also done with Tosh and also involved the reading of one of Etel's poems, felt like a sort of beautiful closing to this sort of period of work around filmic work around science fiction in particular, but also like expanding what that means and how that can be how that can move away from the sort of hard sci-fi that we sort of traditionally imagine science fiction as, and move towards relational spaces and spaces of more expansive and imaginative thinking around being human. So the thing that I'm going to read to you today is a rant, and it is about science fiction, and it's called "The Prime Radiant is Broken, and So Is My Heart." So I'm going to jump into that now. I don't know the future, not personally anyway, but I hear it's bright. My internal monologue trolls me like this whenever I'm invited to think, talk, or write about the future, which happens frequently. These questions began with relentless frequency after my work became associated with the term Gulf futurism in the late 2000s. This phrase came from a blog that I wrote called The Gaze of Sci-Fi Wahhabi. It was born partially out of my experience as a teenager in Qatar. Fossil fuel, gender, techno-dread, and body horror would have been among the hashtags. It was the product of a crucible year spent on Kojo Eshin's oral and visual culture course at Goldsmiths. And there I gorged on a rich diet of critical theory, video art, music history, and pretentious post-lecture pub chat, which left me more bloated than Tetsuo at the end of Akira. I was bursting with ideas. I never intended the blog to be read as widely as it has been, but I have left it on Blogspot unchanged for posterity, whenever that is. So began a brief and unwanted career on the futurist panel circuit. This will sound familiar to artists, writers, scientists, or really anybody whose work provokes a sexy frottage between the now and the later. Mix in hard sci-fi aesthetics or reference certain beloved sci-fi classics, and you're bound to receive similar requests from cultural institutions, podcasts, universities, and most tellingly, corporations. Usually for little or no compensation, typically attended by very wealthy people. These events sometimes felt violent and almost always felt pointless. Who was I even talking to? Was anyone listening? It took an argument over the Oxford English Dictionary with a techno-optimist for me to quit. That year, they were removing Signet from the OED in favor of inserting Bitcoin. His argument went something like, well, I've never seen a Signet. Why do we need a word for it? Well, have you ever seen a Bitcoin? After that, I was done. I went into a deep period of mourning for the future. At first, I thought it was a millennial thing, but it's not. And here I am again in the middle of the end of one world, writing my opinion about this future I keep hearing so much about in exchange for a little coin. I was paid to write this piece. And the question I've been asked is essentially, how can sci-fi help us to rewrite the future? Well, what if we consider speculative fiction as a tool for that instead? To me, speculative fiction includes policy, code, grant applications, lines on maps, budgets. I could go on, please extrapolate from there. This kind of fiction is the realm of possibility, and in novelistic fiction of all kinds, be it pulp, historical, erotic, crime, fan, etc. What is possible is always more important than what is actually probable, which is why storytelling and writing more broadly is a basic processing technology humans developed to convert fantasy into reality. I've not written science fiction as a rule. I made this decision after my first sort of mini gig writing coverage for a movie script. This one in particular was an adaptation of Clay's Ark, one of Octavia Butler's books, one of the hardest sci-fi books in her oeuvre. And to write coverage of a script, you have to strip it down to its component parts, outlining act breaks onto the story's skin, like a surgeon plotting the path for a scalpel. All the joy and love were being drained out of me as I dissected organs and thought about the story engine and broke it all down to scrap. That was around a decade ago. And since then, I've stayed away from my favorite genre, and I specialize in historical fiction as a screenwriter. I think of researching period drama as time travel, and it feeds my art practice as well, which remains future-focused. They say you have to study the past to see the future, and that feels like really important work to me. I look back at the question that I've been posed. How can we think of a break with sci-fi's literary past? Well, I hope that somebody out there gets this reference. Have you tried turning the prime radiant on and off? The prime radiant is a device used in Isaac Asimov's Foundation series. It's actually just a glorified projector. But the point is, it predicts the future by applying mathematical statistics to past events in history and also to human psychology. All of this happens in a conference room full of shadowless psychohistorians. They make color-coded revisions to the equation, which measures and attempts to minimize future negative fallout from the algorithmically determined plan. Basically, change the plan, change the future. And even though it's a fictional device, the US military tried it as an idea with Project Camelot, full name Methods for Predicting and Influencing Social Change and Internal War Potential, in the 20th century. In the 21st century, having a prime radiant is basically what every screwed up and authoritarian government wants, to know and prepare for what the next thing is. The intention is the problem. It's colonial greed. It's raping and pillaging possibility. Look at the internet, understand history, understand the future. Also, I wrote this before this whole metaverse announcement from Zuckerberg, but I would add that in now. So a break with the canon feels short-sighted in my view. Behind the question of a break with science fiction's past, I hear the suggestion that there's a problem with science fiction's present. If anything, it's a hauntologistical one. A lot of sci-fi is written by writers who don't live in the present, but only read sci-fi of the past. The best living sci-fi writers I know stay close to the roots of the genre. They are active, observers of the world and the time they live in. That's why climate fiction is one of the more interesting things to have happened, not just in speculative fiction, but in literature more broadly in the past few years, in my opinion. So back to the observable scientific phenomena, like the cross-pollination of a muskmelon and a mini gourd, or the horizontal gene transfer of supergonorrhea, or the parthenogenesis of a female hammerhead shark, or the parasitism of a lilac-drunk nematode. If we were less worried about breaking with the past and borrowed the adaptive strategies of our current cohabitants on Earth, it would be a wider, wilder, and more imaginative time. And that feels the most urgent of all to me. To diversify the stories being propagated and seeding in the wild. Before she wrote Wild Seed, Octavia Butler wrote these words, so down at the bottom of a page of college rules paper. So be it, see to it. This document proves to me that the causal nexus between a desire and a reality can sometimes be writing it down. Which is why be careful what you write. Be mindful of who you write about. And be sensitive to who you are writing for. And that's something to which the canon of speculative fiction has not been careful or mindful or sensitive. Because the Western concept of what makes a good story well told is drama. And drama by definition involves conflict. And while that's a really big problem when writing for people's entertainment, it's an even bigger problem when it comes to speculative writing of any kind, be it history, legal policy, or 2050 master plans. I think about this every time I end up in a staring contest with a blinking cursor, which happens frequently. And then I remember, I don't know what the fuck I'm on about. I ain't the first one to think these things, and I hope I won't be the last. And as we slide deeper and deeper into the worlds of The Parables and Foundation and 1984 and The Matrix and Brave New World and Blade Runner or Hunger Games, all I can think of is, get me the fuck off this timeline. It's mostly old white men who wrote us into this mess. Now the rest of us gotta write our way out of it. So what I'm saying is, reboot the Prime Radiant, turn off the overhead projectors, shut down the memory banks. It's very dark. It's very quiet. There's only you, the present, in the present, now. And my presence, I think, is no longer required, and I hope that you have a great lunch. Thank you so much for watching my films and listening to me read that rant.